Thank you everyone for coming. I guess we have a small crowd, so if you guys want to move forward, there's a lot of chairs in the front. So you guys heard this morning this session with Mike Gregoire, and I think a lot of you probably attended John Michelson's session. And I'm sure you looking at and reflecting back into what you guys are doing in your organizations, a lot of you are thinking, how do I connect the dots, right? Means that's all great pep talk, but the reality is very different. So I'm here to break that down and try to hopefully connect the dots so you can see that how you take those things and apply in your organizations with what we call the DevTest Portfolio. So basically, DevTest Portfolio or DevTest Solutions is at the core of DevOps at CA. John talked about quite a few of the things that I'm going to be going in next level of details, but and in essence, that's the center of DevOps, the DevTest solutions, and then the other side of the equation is, of course, the APM that's on the Ops Center. So we will be looking at, again, taking a step back from a software development lifecycle, some of the challenges, and how the application portfolio that, from a DevTest perspective, aligns with that, and then going deeper into those product areas and talking about the capabilities so you can align what you are trying to do in your organizations with some of those features and functionalities that we are bringing into the market. So I think both Mike and John, they talked about a lot about the speed at which the organizations are trying to move, and Mike even talked about that speed is no more an asset, it's table stakes. I think there's a lot of truth to it, but when you guys look at your organizations and you say, you know what, I'm a big, large enterprise, complex applications. There's no way I can do a weekly, daily release. Jennifer was great talking about, developer comes in the morning, and by the end of the day, they check in the code and pushes it to production. I think that's the goal, that ultimate goal, but from where you are standing today, that may be very far-fetched. But everybody I talk to, at least they all talk about, if you're doing a quarterly release, you're talking about how do you get to a monthly release. If you're doing a monthly release, I'm sure you're talking about how do you get to a weekly release. Or if you're doing weekly, you're talking about going to a daily release. I had a meeting with Facebook. The Facebook gentleman, I don't know if you guys know, Facebook pushes on a daily basis. They do a daily updates to production, a minor update, and they do a big push to production on every Tuesday. And he was so upset. He was not happy with the Tuesday push. They want to get rid of the Tuesday big push. So even the Facebook is not happy with the speed at which they are doing and which they push their code to production. So we need to figure out how we can help you guys move faster. And not just speed, the quality is important at the same time, right? Otherwise, it's going to be a crash. So with that, if we kind of take a step back and look at our software development life cycles, you will see your development teams trying to work in parallel. Of course, they are the first ones to adopt the Agile Manifesto, and they have started working in parallel, trying to kind of break that serial nature of development. But if you look at your Gantt charts, we all know there's all the dependencies between all the different streams of developments that are going on. So the challenge is that when we look at these developers are kind of working in silo, right? You have the notion of an environment, but it's not an end-to-end environment. There's no ability to run end-to-end scenarios or even do the development until you have access to the environment. Now, if you compare that with, let's say, go back 5 years, 7 years, 10 years back, all the development would happen in a single environment. So we didn't have those challenges. But with the adoption of Agile Manifesto and Agile development practices, these teams are working in parallel. That means each and every team needs an environment. Each developer needs an environment. Well, when they don't have that, they build in a vacuum and they deliver. At the end of that, they just throw it over the wall into the integration lab. And what happens? The code explodes. When you get to the integration lab, it explodes. And that's why you have a lot of back and forth. So that's first challenge, lack of testing in development space. The second is when you're in the integration environment, when you're in the end-to-end environment, the nature of that environment is complex, right? Configuration of that environment, setting up, deploying the bits, getting things up and running. And once the application is deployed, getting the data in place in the right state for your test to succeed. That's another challenge, right? So there's a lot of challenges because of the nature of the complexity of these environments. The third is testing. There's a lot of lack of testing, right? More and more people I talk to, they talk about that they are not able to meet their dates just because they're not able to get enough testing done in time. The risk is still so high, so they keep moving the deadlines out. John talked about that all the innovation is happening in a smaller pie, but the bigger part of the pie is testing, or lack of testing, therefore. And the last is the lack of the feedback. Once we are in the production, nobody look back and see how the software is being used. How can we take all that knowledge and give it back to the developer? How can we close the feedback loop? We all know the Dilbert cycle. We can only go as fast as how our continuous improvement or the feedback cycle comes back to us. So those areas, we have, of course, aligned our solutioning to those areas. That's, of course, continuous development, continuous delivery, continuous validation, and DevOps Analytics. So I'm going to be taking you through 3 of these 4 areas. For continuous delivery, I have one of my colleagues, David Kramer. He's going to be going over that area of solutioning, I think, later today, and we'll cover that then. So the first one is service virtualization. I think by now, if you have attended Mike's and John's session, you probably are pretty good with the concept. Let me take it from an architecture standpoint and try to show you what really it means. When you are a mobile developer or a web developer, and you have dependencies on a lot of these app servers and services, third-party and whatnot, you may be going through an enterprise shared services platform into the mainframes, third-party channels, ERPs. All those systems, when they're not available, you have a lot of downtime on your hand, right? You're waiting for data, you're waiting for the availability, or sometimes you have the data, you have the availability, you just don't have the right capacity in the system. That system is not able to take the 14,000 transactions per second kind of load that you would like to generate on the front end of the application. So when you run into those constraints, we allow you to create what we call a wind tunnel, a simulation environment, by capturing the behavior of those backend systems and then allowing you to replay that behavior in a very low-cost container. That container can run on your Intel platform. You don't need a high-end, mid-tier systems. It's very easy to replicate. A developer can literally have all the virtualized backends running on the laptop, and he could be sitting on a beach, fully disconnected with the rest of the world, and be highly productive. He could be building software, he could be testing functionally, he could be doing a load and performance testing of that component that he's building without ever actually have to touch the real systems behind the scenes. So that's the beauty of service virtualization. It gives you that power that developer never had, and that notion of throwing the code over the wall into the integration lab, that's no more there, right? Now you have full access to the end-to-end environment. So service virtualization is, I know a lot of you guys, it's new, first time you may be hearing it, but it's not really new. We started this journey in 2007. That's when we created the concept of service virtualization. It has gone through a lot of innovation over time. We have filed 28 patents, 21 of them have been awarded to us. And I'm going to talk about some of the new innovation that we're launching at CA World today in terms of how we are taking this technology to a completely different level. So one of the basic premise or assumptions of service virtualization is when you have to virtualize the backend system, you need to know what protocol it is. You need to be able to reverse engineer that protocol so that you can parse the request and understand what's my request, what's my argument, so I can make a good sense of what the request is so that I can effectively find the right response or create the right response that the client will actually accept. And that challenge has caused a lot of adoption issues, because when you're trying to virtualize all different systems and components, the technology or the alphabet soup is pretty huge, right? Now we have taken that away. What we are launching today as part of service virtualization enhancements, we call it artificial intelligence with opaque data processing. Opaque data processing actually gives you the ability to take any bit stream. It can be any protocol, we don't care. We can literally use artificial intelligence, basically the same algorithms that are used to match your DNA with my DNA and says it's a 99.9% same. It's the same GNA sequencing algorithm to reverse engineer the bits on the wire to ultimately make sense of it and understand the request and create a response that is as close to 99.99% accuracy. So we have tested this in the field. We have worked with the customers to strengthen the technology. By the way, the technology was built as a 3-way collaboration with one of the universities. 4 to 5 different students are getting awarded their PhDs on this work, and now it's part of the product. We're really proud of our collaboration with the CTO organization, working with the university and bringing this to life. So this is completely a next generation of service virtualization where you don't even have to really know the protocol that's under the hoods. The next one, innovation. So these basically are between the last one, the ODP and learning mode, we have 6 new patents that we have just added to service virtualization. And those are the ones that are still not awarded, but we filed it last year. So on the learning mode, another challenge that we ran as we were working through, some of you guys rolling it out through the enterprise, is the challenge of keep changing the endpoints. I record it in one environment, playback it in a different environment, and my virtual service ultimately drift back in the virtual world, too far away from reality, because the real system is changing too. The backend systems, even though they're legacy, they're still changing, right? So when I virtualize and take a snapshot of that backend system, if I don't sync with the reality, very often I'm going to drift in the virtual world. And we don't want you to go to production by testing against a system that's stale and old, right? So we have this concept of a learning mode that we're introducing, which allows the service to become intelligent over time. So the service may not know anything on day one. You bring it, you build it, and you just connect with the real system. But over time, the learning improves. And day one, it may be 99% dumb, but day 3, it's 99% intelligent. So it's a true artificial intelligence, and the learning occurs over time. The other thing we're launching today is our whole concept of virtual API cloud. So it allows you to actually use a SaaS-based platform to go and create virtual services for REST-based interfaces. So what that does to you is you don't need to have any install of the product. You don't need to download anything. You don't need anything on-prem. Just point your browser. We call the concept of bring your own payload, BYOP. And you can upload those payloads through the browser, get an endpoint, and get going with your development, integration, testing, whatever you guys need to do there. So it's live at vapi.ca.com. You guys are free to go there, explore it, sign it up. And you don't even have to actually sign up. You have a Git account. You can just log in, use your Git account, and you're good to go. So very slick, very modern UI. And we're excited. We're going to be tracking a lot of usage on this one, but it's live as of today. The next area is, of course, continuous validation. We talked about how big of a testing challenge is. There are quite a few products that ultimately come together to solve this solution. So as part of our DevTest solutions portfolio, we are talking about application test, cloud test, mobile cloud, and data finder. So let me go into a little bit in the detail on what these products are and how do they come together. So we use this terminology you saw even in the Mike's presentation this morning, mainframe to mobile. Your enterprise application has so many layers, so many things that's going on. Just testing at the web is not enough. You need to be able to test at any layer in the architecture, whether it's API, whether it's mobile front end or the web front end, or whether it's enterprise service bus, messaging, JMS, your ERP provider, whether it's your web methods or the TIBCOs or the SAPs of the world, no matter, or the mainframe itself. You should have the native capability to invoke at any layer in the architecture and then verify at any other layer in the architecture. That ability to have the same single tool that allows you to do that will give you a lot of benefits in terms of acceleration, streamline of a tool chain across your organization. So you're not using one tool for unit, another tool for function, another for performance, another for regression. It's the same exact tool that works across the board and across all the different technology stack. So let me actually use a graphic to explain. So here's a conceptual architecture diagram. I think it can represent most of the modern applications and architectures. You're looking at first setting it up using our continuous delivery solution. You can eliminate the dependencies on those unavailable backend systems, constrained backend systems using service virtualization. So the moment you have now replaced those unavailable services with virtual services, you have the notion of an end-to-end environment. The environment set up, you're ready to go. What's the first thing that now you need to do? You need to set up the data. The data must be synced across all the systems, whether it's a backend system or the front-end system. All the data has to be in sync. So that's where the data finder comes in. That's our second product as part of the portfolio. The third product then is you can start testing. You don't have to wait for the web or the mobile applications to be built out. If APIs are ready, start testing with the APIs. So CA application test allows you to actually test all different types of APIs, whether it's REST, JSON, whether it's your own proprietary XML that's flowing over any kind of a proprietary protocol. you could be writing any type of APIs and you can start testing. The next is your web piece is ready. You can start doing web testing with application test, and you can also do mobile testing with our application test. If you're just using simulators and emulators, you can do that. And if you want to take the same exact test case and then run it in the cloud on physical devices, we also provide CA mobile cloud. So that mobile cloud allows you to actually pick a mixture of different physical devices in the cloud, so you don't have to manage that in your own lab. Some of them are OEM partnerships. I'm going to go over them towards the end of my presentation on which ones of them are OEM and how you can go find more information about those things later in the day. But if you are more interested in the application test, there is a demo station here right behind where you can see it from here. So would encourage you if you want to go and deep dive into that thing. There's a great demo there you can look at. The other interesting thing is the whole concept of testing is no longer an event. So what that means is once you have created these test cases, you can register them as monitors into a continuous validation environment. So you're not kicking off the test cases just because you have a new build. You're not doing the testing at the end of every build or on a staged event. Testing just happens all the time. You release is, let's say, at the end of December, you create a test case, you set it up in the integration environment, and the test case will run every 5 minutes in that environment. And if it fails, it will broadcast, it will let everybody know. But you are not saying, I'm going to start testing now and I'm going to stop testing tomorrow. The reason being, in an integrated environment, when you have so many changes happening all the time, you may be done on Friday, saying, I'm done with my testing, thumbs up. Monday, we will have a release, go to production. Whoa, what happened? Saturday, some change just creeped in. Somebody did a change into the API. It just invalidated all my testing I did till Friday. I have to start all over again on Monday. What that means is you can't plan when you start and when you end. You have an integration environment where testing is just happening all the time, 24/7, right? That's what the concept is. Testing is no longer an event. You just set it up, and it's just, if anything fails, you will know. So if anybody changes any service or anything changed in the environment, the test case will fail automatically, and everybody will know. You don't have to wait for the next event. Another area that I think if you were there with the John Michelson's morning session, you saw the whole concept of automate the automation, or what we call the continuous application insight. That's part of our initiative, what we're calling it at DevOps Analytics. The concept is how do you learn from your late stage environments and then use that information to become more intelligent and feed that back ultimately all the way to the developer. So the developer can use that information to generate what we call actionable intelligence. So I know he talked about a couple of scenarios. I'm going to go a little bit into details, but you're looking at basically all the late stage environments, not just production. We're talking about integration labs, staging environments, performance environments, and taking that learning and bringing it more upstream all the way to the developer. So today, a perfect example is capacity data, automated test cases, virtual services. These are all manual efforts. So when we look at from a DevOps perspective and we talk about speed and quality, going faster, one of the biggest things that are pretty obvious are the manual effort that goes on all different stages. And of course, anything that's manual is error prone, and it injects more risk into the process. So we look at how we can actually use the software to learn about the software and then use that same learning to generate actionable intelligence so that humans don't have to do the same thing. So with that, let me show you a graphic that actually clearly explains what the application insight is. We have the ability to pull data from a lot of different disparate sources. We have our own agents that you can inject in your containers. We can actually pull the data from the likes of Splunk. We can pull data from Layer 7, from Dynatrace, you can even write your own adapter. We have the adapter APIs, so you can actually implement that on your side for any kind of a custom source of data. Once the data is in the application inside, we munge it, we actually process it, we stitch it together, we do a lot of things with the data so that we can make a lot of sense out of it and generate these actionable assets. Some examples of these assets are, of course, virtual services. So if you have to virtualize a mainframe, you don't need to understand all the kicks and everything. You can see it, and you can just click on a component and say, this mainframe, I want to virtualize it, and done. Same thing with the database. You want to virtualize a database, you can do that pretty quickly because we done that most of the hard part for you behind the scenes. Same thing with the test cases. Regression testing is always like chasing from behind, right? Means we're building a lot of new functionality, and then we have to automate. And by the time we are done automating, there's a lot more functionality that comes as part of the next release. So we're always chasing from behind. Now, regression test automation, we believe we shouldn't be spending any manual labor in doing that. Software can do that for us. Means we can automate the automation. We can generate automated test cases for you. Let me go a little bit more into the details. The third one example I want to talk about is defects mining. By the way, what you see the graphic here is an example of how the transactions look at once we mine the data, stitch the data. We'll show you the deep end-to-end transactions and this, by the way, go both from open systems all the way into the mainframe. So if you have mainframes, we will show your transactions deep into the mainframe, going through your LPARS and KICS programs, so you can see how the applications within the mainframe are working. Once you see that, we have the ability to surface the defects. So as a developer, it's a great way for me to actually optimize my application and find defects even before anybody else actually looks at the application. You can set certain thresholds. You can see, we'll warn you that, hey, this looks fishy. There's a warning here. And we'll highlight those things with red. So you can look at that component, what that is doing, and say, oh, well, that's a defect. I'm going to file it. I'm going to fix it. So that's called defects mining, making it easier for a developer to find the defects even before any kind of a testing is going to start. Right? The second is automated test creation. Now, I know a lot of us, we talk about it. I think this is not new. Even 10 years back, I used to be talking about how can we automate the automation where we don't have to do it manually. This is a long effort. We have been working on this technology, this particular use case for more than 5 years now. And the first iteration that we built was all about take a request, take a response, align it, do a golden copy comparison, and that's your test case. That was okay, good start, but what we're talking about here is a fully orchestrated test case that we generate behind the scene for you. If a tester is going into the website, doing login, doing a bunch of things, and he logs out, that entire workflow is captured. That means we are automatically parsing the responses, taking out the information that may be needed for the next request that needs to go out. All that thing is done behind the scene for you. So the test case really looks like as if it's created by a human being, not by a machine, right? So that's automate the automation. And of course, the same way we can generate virtual services, not just the test cases. The next concept, I call it one-click defect replay. This is a very interesting concept because now you can imagine when you're going through the defects mining or you're trying to explore defects, you identify a component that we know there's a problem in that. We have isolated that defect. But you still need to reproduce that in your dev environment. We allows you to have a single click to generate all the virtual services, all the backend systems, and capture them as virtual services, and at the same time, create a test case that will recreate the exact same defect in that component. I call it micro environments. So this micro environment can be used by the developer to replay that defect on his own desktop. He does not need the full end-to-end environment anymore. And by doing that, he can reproduce, he can fix, and he can then validate the fix on his desktop without actually the need for the data, for the environment, the setup, all the things are gone, right? So that's one-click defect replay. And if you want to know more about it, we have a demo again on the same Dev Center where we can actually show you live working in our demo stations. The last slide, some of the OEMs that we have. I think you may have heard of some of them. Data Finder is our OEM through Grid Tools, test data management solutions. We have a demo station here if you want to actually go more deeper into that thing. A lot of these solutions, we are building tighter integration into these things with our organic products. But you're looking at cloud tests if you're interested in generating the load from the cloud. That's our source story. And then mobile cloud, which is the devices in the cloud. The example that I shared earlier on, if you have the need to actually take the same exact test case that you build using the application test, but you want to run it against Perfecto Cloud, you can do that. You can even run it against Sauce Labs. You can run it against App Purify. You can run the same test case against mobile labs. It doesn't have to be just one provider. We want to give you that heterogeneity, the freedom to pick the mobile device provider that you want to work with. So with that, I think there's some sessions that I would like to highlight if you guys are interested, especially if you have SAP in your accounts and you want to understand how you can actually eliminate dependencies on SAP environments. We virtualize SAP environments. This innovation happened over the last year. If you have SAP, I can tell you that this is very compelling. Setting up an SAP environment is a pain. Finding the SAP expert is a pain. Resetting the data is yet another pain. So if you have SAP in the environment, you will love it. We can actually virtualize the SAP batch processes. We can virtualize SAP workflows, business processes. We can do that not just at the simple SOAP and JMS. We can do it at the RFC and the BAPI layer, at any layer within the, and it's bidirectional. Same thing on the, another session is application test. I talked about it. There's actually a pre-con today at 3 o'clock in, I think, Lagoon I, if you guys want to go there. And then more about application insight. So if you are interested in the application insight use case that I talked about and have more interest in going deeper, there's a session tomorrow at 11 a.m. And I highly recommend that if you guys, to attend that one. With that, I think that's pretty much it.